First off, for the audience, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your research before we get started?
Sure. Thanks, David, and thank you for having me on your podcast here. Well, right now we're just getting prepared for the start of another semester at the University, Boston College. So the students will all be descending upon the school next week, where I'm a professor of biology, teaching cancer metabolism as well as general biology. And we conduct a very active research program in understanding and better analyzing cancer metabolism and developing therapies, non-toxic therapies. So we roll it all in together. Cancer is a major discussion point in the classes that I teach and also in the research that I do with my associates and students.
Okay, wow. Now, from what I've gathered, you actually started in epilepsy.
Yeah, when I first did my postdoctoral work at Yale University back in the 1970s, that department of neurology was one of the leading programs in the country on epilepsy. I had received a degree in genetics and biochemistry from the University of Illinois, and my plan was to study lipid biochemistry, glycolipid biochemistry, with the late Robert Yu, and that's what I went there for. But they said, if you really want to remain in the Department of Neurology at Yale University, you better do something related to epilepsy, because that was the main focus. So what I did was dovetail glycobiology, and then I learned an awful lot about epilepsy from all my colleagues that worked there. So yes, we dovetailed genetics, biochemistry in relationship to epilepsy and other neurological diseases as well.
Oh, wow. So how did this develop into diet treatment?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. You have to realize that everyone at Yale, many of the people at Yale they were electrophysiologists and neurologists and this kind. And at that time, people were looking for mutations that, inherited mutations that would be controlling epilepsy. And so we were mapping genes for epilepsy and all this. And when I left Yale in 1985 to come to Boston College, of course, my epilepsy program was quite extensive, but we were doing research on cancer biochemistry as well. But what we found was that one of my students said we should start looking at ketogenic diets for managing epilepsy in some of the models that we had. And I was not that enthusiastic about it, but it later became, we became leaders in using ketogenic diets for epilepsy, even though it was that was developed in the 1920s by Wilder. It really hadn't received much attention using diet management for epilepsy until Jim Abrams of the Hollywood movie range started to make a movie, First Do No Harm, and his son Charlie Abrams, who he set up a foundation called the Charlie Foundation, which was to help kids with epilepsy. And he was very impressed with how powerful ketogenic diets were for managing epileptic seizures. So we had been doing this in the mouse models, and then at the same time we were studying cancer, developing models for cancer. And we realized that based on the work of Otto Warburg in cancer, that ketogenic diets or calorie restriction or fasting may be just as effective in managing epilepsy as in cancer as it was in epilepsy. So it was kind of a parallel program, independent of each other, until we started using calorie restriction, fasting, and ketogenic diets for managing both seizures and cancer. And then, of course, what's the mechanism by which this works? And we still don't really understand how this works to manage seizures. The only thing we know is that blood glucose level is a good biomarker for determining whether or not you're going to have a breakthrough seizure. And Warburg said glucose was a driver of cancer. So we put the two together, and we actually can figure out much better how ketogenic diets work against cancers than we can in knowing how ketogenic diets work against epilepsy. So that's still a very active. Both fields of ketogenic diet and cancer are now both active research fields, but the mechanisms are so much more clear for cancer than they are for epilepsy. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So the results are more effective.
Well, I don't know if they're more effective. I mean, we know we can manage epileptic seizures quite effectively in children. As long as the children can remain with a lower steady blood sugar, their seizures are, in many, many cases, managed or actually resolved. Whereas in cancer, I don't know if we've cured anybody with a ketogenic diet. We have a lot of people that are using metabolic therapy, let's put it that way, that are still alive with cancer. I mean, whether they're in complete remission, partial remission, we don't know. They haven't done it long enough. As I said, to know whether you're fully managed, you have to live to be 95 or 100 and die from something other than cancer. How would we know that you would? Okay, a guy's like, oh, I took metabolic therapy when I was young, and I was managed. I didn't have any tumor recurrence for 40 years. And then all of a sudden, at 41 years, all of a sudden the tumor came back. Well, what do you say about that? The issue is, the only thing I know we have, but we did do a dog, and that we published, a dog with a mast cell tumor on his face. And we cured that dog. Yeah, he died of old age from heart failure, but the cancer never came back. So we know we got him. But if you ask me, what's your success rate, I would say one dog, for sure.
Yeah, one dog for sure. I actually saw that one that had the tumor on his nose.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah. He survived to 15 and a half years and died in the arms of his pet parent there from an enlarged heart. But his tumor never returned. So, but he's the only one we can be 100% sure of. You'd have to do that with a mouse. No, it's very hard to cure cancer in a mouse. People say, oh, you should cure cancer in a mouse. All those models that they cure are not, they're all artificial models. They're all like genetically created things. You get natural models, you get natural cancer in the mouse. It's very, very hard to manage completely. But we're coming close. We do better in humans than we do in the mouse. But did we cure anybody in human? I don't. We haven't had them out long enough. You have to die from old age, and then without cancer from something other. Then So when you say, "Oh, can you cure epilepsy?" I don't know. Maybe we can. Maybe we can't. But we're doing a better job than other folks are.
Well, certainly a healthier choice too. The reason I asked about epilepsy, my eldest sister had epilepsy too. It was brought on by childbirth when she had her first child. And of course, the standard of care, take a pill, and she's on a pill for the rest of her life. But again, over the last, even myself actually, I'm in remission now, 9 years from my stem cell transplant. And I think that has come down to my diet. It's largely a ketogenic diet the whole time since then, through my recovery. So I've done pretty well by myself.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the general scientific concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, we will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
It's just incredible to see so much of the research that you are doing. I just wish I had found it a lot earlier, obviously, but it's all good now. So we're moving forward, and I just think it's brilliant. I just think that everything should be. Well, it seems to me like the body responds a lot more to a natural human diet than it does to any sort of medications.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think medications are important, but I think the future is going to be a diet medication kind of combination, I think. I don't think we should throw out all of the stuff that's been developed to try to manage cancer over the last 50 years. But I think it needs to be used in perhaps a different context, different ways at dosages and timing and scheduling that are far, far less toxic than is currently being used. I think the diets like that we developed, or fasting, or whatever you want to call it, that lowers blood sugar and elevates ketones, makes many of these drugs work so much better at such a much more effectively with much, much lower dosages. So it's good to see that some of these drugs are in fact important. The problem is they're not used correctly in too high of a concentration, or too often, where you get so much adverse effects on the normal cells of the body. You actually harm significantly organ systems and physiology, where if you knew how to use those drugs in a different context, lower concentrations, less with the lower dosages, and scheduling is changed, and let those drugs work together with the diet, so you have diet drug synergy, and then you could get, I think you could be able to manage cancer far more effectively with much, much less toxicity. And I think that would be a major step forward. Yeah,
I agree. That's just it just sounds brilliant, actually, because I remember through my treatment, my treatment was quite heavy dose, and over a number of years as well. So the volume was there as well. A lot of damage, neurologically, physically, like the organs and everything. I agree. Much lower dose over time I would have thought.
Well, you see, you have to have some studies that will correct that or do that to prove the point. I mean, we have published papers in the preclinical mouse models showing essentially that, but it has to be done in humans as well to prove that. And it's very hard to get the kinds of trials in humans that would be required to illustrate that, because you'd have to do several different control groups. You would have to use standard of care like you experienced, which is pretty horrific. And then you would have to have standard of care with metabolic therapy. And then you'd have to have metabolic therapy by itself. And you need to compare and contrast the outcome from those kinds of groups. And right now, the medical system would say that metabolic therapy without standard of care cannot be done for a variety of reasons. So you're missing your key control group, which would be, metabolic therapy, which is diet drugs. But they're off target. They're off-label drugs. They're kind of repurposed drugs and things like this. that works really well. But with respect to the kind of chemicals that you experienced that made you very, very sick, if we use those same chemicals at much lower dosages, along with a metabolic approach, you may have experienced the same level of overall efficacy with minimal, if any, toxicity. And I think that's the biggest problem with one of the biggest problems with cancer, is that many folks fear the treatments as much as they fear the disease, because they don't want to be horrifically sick and have organ damage and all these terrible adverse effects that you can get from some of the current standards of care. We think with metabolic therapy, we can significantly reduce the adverse toxicity, while at the same time increasing therapeutic efficacy. The problem is trying to get a hospital, a major cancer center, to buy on to that strategy. And as far as I know, it's not being done anywhere, despite the evidence from the preclinical science and evidence from some people who have done this. So it just takes time, I think.
Yeah. Like this is a good example of people believing in education. I feel like it's very difficult to change beliefs, and when you trust your education so much that it becomes a belief, it's like a dogma religion. Changing people's minds can be very difficult. But
we know that from the political situation that we have in the country.
Well, yeah, around the world, hopefully, though, the last few years, people would have learnt a lot.
Yeah, well, you'd hope so. But, sometimes, yeah, well, that's the thing, when it comes to the theory of different diseases. Oh, I should have taken that off the hook. It'll run out in a minute.
Yeah, that's fine.
The view of this is a very difficult problem that we're facing now with respect to the cancer. That is if you go to every major hospital and the National Cancer Institute, they call cancer a genetic disease. And the research money that's invested, from the federal government or from private foundations and these kinds of things, they raise massive amounts of money to study cancer. And you have to say to yourself, are they studying cancer as a genetic disease or as a mitochondrial metabolic disease? And so if it's not a genetic disease, what are they doing with all the money, the billions of dollars that they collect, and they give you major mega research grants to the major cancer centers and private investors or research scientists and things? So, and yet every year we get more guys dying of cancer. So what do they do with all this kind of money? And that's the big problem I see is, put that off the hook. The big problem I see is that there seems to be no accountability in using the money that's raised to treat cancer. I think the gratification comes in the activity of raising the money, rather than what they use it for or the outcome. Like when you have people, cancer survivors or family members who run for Susan Komen Blue Pink Ribbon campaign for breast cancer, the people who mostly benefit are those that are running and biking, and because they have a camaraderie, they all feel good that they think in their mind that they might be doing something valuable. But no one ever asks where the money goes, what kind of research is this money used for, and where's the outcome? People should say to themselves, we've been doing this fundraising for cancer for 35 or 40 years, and all we get is more cancer. The more money we raise for cancer, the more cancer we get. At some point, somebody's going to have to say, what the hell are you guys doing with all the money we're raising? We could have built a whole new city. We could build the best railway systems in the world with all the money we're using for cancer, and we're not getting anything from it except more dead people.
Absolutely. You could build a whole country with somebody.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same everywhere. I mean, you go to England or Australia, you go anywhere, they're always raising money from somebody. Federal governments or whatever government is giving out dollars to cancer research centers, and all we get is more cancer. And it's not going away. It's getting worse. And people are saying, oh, my God, what are we doing? And that goes back to the theory under what drives the underlying mission here. If it's not a genetic disease and it's a mitochondrial metabolic disease, meaning it's driven by abnormal energy metabolism, then that should be the focus of all of this money raising. How do you do diet drug combos to shut down the energy metabolism of the tumor cells? And that becomes a very clear strategy, actionable with astonishing outcomes. But if the mindset is that it's a genetic disease, then it's like the dog chasing his tail. He'll never achieve the mission, because the overall concept of what the disease is incorrect. So until we realize that it's a metabolic disease, we're not going to achieve the kinds of management and control that we would have all hoped from raising all this money.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's an old adage, I think, in sales. They say there's no point rowing harder if you're in the wrong boat.
Yeah.
So if you're in the wrong boat, you're still going in the wrong direction.
Well, I can say that the cancer industry is in the wrong boat, and they're pumping billions, and people. I think people are starting. There's a slow, gradual people scratching their heads and saying, where's the accountability for all this? And I want to see. And most of the folks, they say, well, our treatments are palliative. Well, people should know palliative means we're just going to try to keep you alive a little bit longer than doing nothing. Not curing you, but just trying to keep you alive a little bit longer. It shouldn't be palliative. It should be management. We want to manage your cancer long term so you can get on with your life and don't feel like you have the angel of death looking over your shoulder every time you wake up in the morning. Yeah,
and that's exactly how it feels, actually. With my diagnosis, follicular lymphoma, the diagnosis is that it's a recurring cancer that you'll never be rid of. It'll always come back. And it did 2 years later, almost to the day from my first diagnosis. It was back to stage 4. So I'd actually gone through RCHOP for 8 rounds. Then I had 18 rounds of radiation. And then every 2 months for 14 months, I was on a MabThera treatment. And then I was exactly where I started, back to stage 4 again. So it was kind of, it's a little bit demoralizing when you sort of go through all that, and then it gets, you strike back, right back where you started.
Yeah, no, terrible, terrible.
And then it just gets worse. And you
look pretty good now, so obviously something worked.
Yeah, well, I put a lot of that down to diet afterwards. Actually, everything after that was pretty horrific, actually. But
see, that's the whole thing that we're trying to eliminate. We would like to have the outcome similar to what you are now in, and avoid all that horrific body damage and stress that you went through. In other words, end up with the same outcome, but eliminate all the toxicity. And for whatever reason, people think you have to suffer in order to get rid of your cancer. And the very nature of human suffering is supposed to make you feel good about getting rid of something that's bad because you really suffered hard. But you have to realize that you're a lucky one, because a lot of people that would have had your diagnosis never made it through the treatment.
Yeah,
especially when
that's
they're
right.
older folks, people in their 60s and 70s or 80s that would have this horrific treatment. Their body just simply can't take that kind of a beating, and they die. The young people, of course, when the younger body is more resilient than the older body. So younger people in general tend to do better. They can tolerate, obviously, more abuse than the old guy. So the old person. So, but yeah, we're trying to eliminate all that. Why our metabolic approach, which is called the press pulse strategy, we press glucose and we pulse against the glutamine, but it's designed to gradually degrade tumor cells strategically based on their metabolic weaknesses, but at the same time, enhancing the health and vitality of the other cells in the body. So as you gradually degrade your tumor, your body becomes stronger and stronger and more resilient. And that's the beauty of press pulse metabolic therapy, because what we're seeing in a few of the folks that are doing this is that not only did their cancer, stage 4 cancers, gradually degrade, but at the same time, many of the other comorbidities they might have had, like diabetes and hypertension and high blood pressure and all these other things, they also seem to dissipate while the cancer is being degraded. So this is, again, another example of metabolic therapy, not only targeting and eliminating the very nature of the problem, which would have been a dysregulated group of growing cells, but also the return of many other systems in the body to an original healthy state. And taking high dose chemo and the things that you went through in one way or another damaged parts of your body, and maybe in some cases significantly. And it may take very, very long period of time to really recover from that kind of an abuse. But in metabolic therapy, we're trying to avoid or reduce that as much as possible, so someone can emerge from this healthier and in pretty good shape without having the collateral damages that you would expect for various organ systems as the result of either radiation or high-dose chemotherapies.
Yeah. So, first point. I guess I was very lucky, actually. When I was very young when I was diagnosed, just 38. So, and my body was fairly used to a lot of abuse, pain through sports and things like that as well. But obviously from the diet as well. But is there anywhere that is actually implementing your protocols at the moment?
Well, the protocol is not completely written yet. We're almost finished with it. We have bits and pieces of it that people are doing. They can measure their glucose ketone index using the Keto Mojo or other blood glucose ketone monitors. And they can do that themselves. So a lot, and that's the first step in the treatment protocol anyway, is that the cancer patient must get their blood sugars down and their ketones up and into this new metabolic zone. It's like a zone of fasting, but you can do it with any diet that would lower the blood sugar and elevate the ketones. Water-only fasting, Mediterranean diets, vegan diet, carnivore diet, doesn't make any difference as long as you can get into the zone. And then once the patient is in the zone, then we would like to administer various repurposed drugs that specifically target the pathways that would be driving the dysregulated growth of the tumor cell. We are almost completed then writing a very, very comprehensive treatment protocol for glioblastoma, deadly brain cancer. And we start with glioblastoma mainly because they have nothing. Those folks are pretty much goners as soon as they're diagnosed. So if we can make a major impact on keeping glioblastoma patients alive 2-3 times longer than they would have been expected to live, and we know that Um, Almost all can. In fact, I haven't found any cancer that doesn't require a fermentation mechanism to stay alive, which means energy without oxygen. So our treatment protocol for glioblastoma would be effective for managing all the major common cancers in the same strategy, which is hard for the field to understand because they seem to think cancer is 100 different diseases and all. It's all very, very similar. They can't live without fermentation mechanism, which means energy without oxygen. All of them, they all grow without oxygen. So the question is, you just target the fermentation fuels while transitioning the normal cells over to highly respiratory fuels like ketones and fatty acids. And then the cancer cells gradually degrade. And it will work against almost every major common cancer.
That sounds great. So what about
including lymphoma?
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you said, like it all comes from damaged mitochondria. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What would the or the life or the quality of life be like? Do you think treatment?
Well,
treatment?
I think you get healthier, and we use blood work to determine that. When we look at a person's electrolytes, the lipid markers, triglycerides and cholesterol and vitamin levels and all these kinds of markers that we would call in the zones of physiological health, that all tells us that this individual would be in a much more in a healthier state of physiology. And then, of course, you just ask the guy, how do you feel? I mean, that's not a difficult question. Like right now, how do you feel? You feel all right now?
I feel great, actually.
Okay, there you go. That's the word. You feel great. Okay,
Yeah.
then we'll double. You say, are you sure about that? So let's do a comprehensive blood workup on your blood. And we'll just hypothetically say we looked at all your blood markers and they all look like they're in the healthy zone. So when you said, I feel great, well, we have all your blood work saying basically the same thing. So, and that's what you see with someone who would be treated with metabolic therapy, is that their cancer would be managed. I don't want to say it's, but they feel much better. And and their blood work looks that way. We have a guy in England, Pablo Kelly in Devon, England, who is with a glioblastoma. Now he's survived 9 years, but the tumor never went away. It's still there. He just keeps it under control with his diet and lifestyle. And every few years, he has a surgery to remove some of it. But folks with that kind of a tumor, they usually die far sooner than what Pablo is experiencing. So is he cured of cancer? Absolutely not. Is he in a good state of health? How does he feel? He feels pretty good, other than he has occasional seizures or one of these kinds of things. But his general quality of health is not bad. I'm not going to say it's maybe as good as yours, but he feels good, generally good about himself. And he's going through his life. He's been married, has 2 kids that he would have never had if he had not done metabolic therapy, because they all said he would have been dead in 9 months if they did standard of care. And here he is, he rejected standard of care, no radiation, no chemo, no steroids. The only thing he did do was the surgery. But, and I think surgery is a curative aspect of many cancers, if the surgery can be done appropriately and correctly. Because a lot of times folks go in and they get whatever it is, breast, colon, whatever, they go in and aggressively remove a tumor before shrinking it down metabolically. If you shrink the tumor down metabolically before the surgical procedure, then the surgeon has a much greater ease in removing almost 90% or 100% of it, so that it never comes back. So again, all of the tools that we are currently using to manage cancer, we should continue with many of them. The problem is you need to know how to use them in a new context. Surgery can cure cancer. There is no question about it. but you got to do it at the right time and the right stage when the patient is strong and the cancer is very, very weak. And then the surgeon can debulk it and with a greater opportunity of long-term management. So, because what happens is if you go in too aggressively when the cancer is first diagnosed, and you change the microenvironment, you can spread fragments of the tissue into the bloodstream, leading to a metastatic condition or recurrence of the cancer at some point after the surgical procedure. So, and this has happened over and over again. There's hundreds and hundreds of papers written about this. So the best thing to do is completely shrink down that tumor, make it very indolent, and then surgically debulk it. So surgery is going to always be a major part of the cancer management strategy. It just needs to be done at the right time and in the right way.
Yeah, and on the right cancer too, I guess.
Well, I mean,
mine was
yeah, well, of course, but if it metastasizes, you're already, surgery now becomes much less of an option with metastatic lesions, which is the spread of the tumor to other organs from the original site. There's where you're going to have to use systemic metabolic therapy to kill those metastatic cells. And I'm not saying we don't use certain drugs. I mean, I think certain drugs together with metabolic therapy may be able to provide a much greater opportunity for long-term success, but not just, high dose chemo and all this crazy stuff. It makes the patient sick and it puts them at a lower chance for a complete recovery.
It also has a high mortality rate.
Yeah. And again, it all depends on how old the person is. I see so many people, older folks, die from the treatments before they die from the cancer. Whereas in the case of the younger folks, the cancer will return, but eventually all the toxicity, it's a battle between the toxic drugs and procedures you're throwing at the patient, and how much you can kill the tumor cells. And if your body is healthy, the body will turn and eat the tumor cells also, but you have to have a strong, healthy body to do that. So you have to you play all the normal cells in your body off the few tumor cells that you have, and next thing you know, the body turns on the tumor. It's called autolytic cannibalism is the name of the process. Autolytic means self. Your body will turn and cannibalize the tumor cells, and use the metabolites in the tumor cells to feed the normal cells of the body, especially when the body is under calorie restricted conditions where you're not eating the kinds of foods. Your body now has to look for food within. It looks for food within. And what it does is it does a very careful metabolic surveillance of every organ system and all cells and all organ systems to make sure all organ systems and cells are operating at their maximal level of efficiency. And if the body finds cells that are not operating at maximal level of efficiency, it turns on those cells and consumes them and delivers the metabolites to the rest of the cells in the body. So the tumor cells then become fuel for the rest of the cells because they're so much weaker and so much less fit than the normal cells of the body. And that's why some people have actually eliminated completely their cancer by long-term water-only fasting for 20 or 30 days. And you start to see the tumor cells just completely dissolve. But most folks can't do that or don't want to do that. And they're looking for either easier ways. Everybody wants the easiest way. And I know that. I mean, it's part of human nature. Is there something else you can give me that I don't have to not eat for 35 days to get rid of my tumor? And the answer is yes. We can do it. We think we can do it better. But if you really want to do water-only fasting for 30 days, be my guest. It'll work really well and probably eliminate the majority. But you can't. You've got to do it when your body is semi-healthy. You can't say, "Oh, I want to do water-only fasting after you've been poisoned and irradiated." Your body can't tolerate the stress of that.
No, it'd be far too weak.
Yeah.
I think the society we live in, everything's in abundance. There's an abundance of sugar everywhere, and there's an abundance of everything. Mm-hmm. So fasting is not exactly high on everyone's priority. They don't even think about it. They think they're hungry, so they just consume more.
Oh, it's terrible.
and no one
It's
wants to
all
give up.
society, Western society. It's everywhere. Every one of our societies is like this. There's an abundance of, and then you have these poor folks in some of these countries that are all starving to death, and then you have these other folks in some other countries, and they're obese. And there's a complete abnormal distribution of food, and the obesity is due to a large consumption of large amounts of poorly nutritious foods. It's hard to get fat eating tomatoes or a grain-fed beef or natural beef. Let's say pasture-fed beef. It's very hard to really get fat eating foods that have very low carbohydrates in them. And the obesity epidemic, which is striking the world, is nothing more than the millions of years that we've gone through to store energy. Don't forget, in the Paleolithic period of our existence on the planet, we were mostly starved, and it was very hard to get food. You have to run and kill something, or you have to hack it apart. We had no farming. It was hunting and gathering. Well, gathering, you're walking around trying to find stuff to eat. And hunting, it's not easy to run down and kill a buffalo or some other elk. I mean, if people think that's easy, with a shotgun or a high-powered rifle, it might not be a problem. But if you only had spears and a knife or some stone, you try to take down a buffalo, man, you're going to have to use up a hell of a lot of energy. And it's very hard to get obese when you're living in that kind of an environment. But then all of a sudden, the environment changes very, very dramatically within 100 years, or maybe even 75 years or less. And all of a sudden, all the energy in the world is now available at your fingertip. No matter where you go, you have highly processed foods, massively high in carbohydrates, with minimal, if any, nutritional value, that tastes so good. And what do you expect? Obesity is the natural outcome of this. I mean, nobody should be surprised.
No, that's right. Exactly. Well, I mean, now you don't even have to go anywhere to get it.
In fact, you don't even have to leave your car. They actually hand the food through a window, right? As I said, and some people don't even want to unask the car to walk into the fast food shop to stand at the counter. And then they wonder why they're obese. It's like, oh, I'm so strange. I don't understand what's going on.
And it's always the same answer. It's always the genes.
Well, the genes, those genes allowed us to be here today. Otherwise, we would have been dead a long time ago. If we were not able to store energy during the Paleolithic period, our species would not exist on the planet today. So all the things related to the humankind, because of us, would not exist if it weren't for genes that allowed us to store energy during the hard times.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons. I eventually I learned to listen to my body, because I remembered after so many heavy treatments, every now and then I just get massive cravings for meat, because I had to rebuild my body. I needed proteins and I needed fats, because everything was just so broken down, bone tissue and muscle and everything. So I sort of reverted back to what I call it, like just a caveman diet.
Well, that's called the Paleolithic. Caveman lived during the Paleolithic period. The Paleolithic period was hundreds of thousands of years in our existence. The Neolithic period, which started about 10,000 years ago, somewhere in that general area, is when humans started to cultivate crops. And obviously the cultivation of crops led to the development of civilizations, because you didn't have to chase down the food if you could grow it. And of course, many of the foods that we had, the wheat, the rice, the corn, they had more carbohydrate in them. Then we could gain a little bit more weight, become a little bit more fit. in that regard. We didn't have to spend as much energy trying to kill animals, and then we would raise animals too, farm the animals, so we would have the food sources at a much more convenient. So that was the beginning of what we call the Neolithic period, which was about 10,000 years ago. Before that, it was hunter-gatherer stuff, and that was, I would be shocked if any member of our early ancestral folks were obese in that kind of an environment. It would be really something to see. But in fact, our ancestral, the primitive aboriginal peoples that live on the planet today and who adhere to their traditional lifestyles are rarely obese. It's only when the Western diet and lifestyle enters in do you see obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, dementia, all of the so-called chronic diseases that we suffer from are all in one way or another linked to the diet and lifestyle of the society.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it even takes a high percentage of these ultra-processed foods. A lot of people I've seen that are obese, they actually do not eat a lot of food. They just eat, the higher percentage of their diet is ultra-processed.
Yeah, and we've evolved over millions of years to store carbs. You very rarely urinate carbs out of your body. We have a filtration system that saves them because the carbohydrates are immediately converted into fat if you have excess. Any excess carb is going to be stored in adipocytes for the most part, insulin driven. And if you're eating a lot of carbs, you're going to definitely, and poorly nutritious carbs, you're going to store fat from that. You don't get fat eating fat. People always make that mistake. They always think, this is high fat. No. Fats are either burned or excreted. It's very hard to store energy as fat unless you have the glycerol backbones, but that requires energy as well.
Yeah, exactly. I remember back in the 80s and 90s, and it's still going today, the whole low fat fad.
Low fat.
Everything has to be low fat.
Yeah, low fat means high carbs. So you really get fat on low fat stuff.
Yeah, it's just crazy advertising too. I remember.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way they advertise it too, everything had to be low fat, especially dairy.
Yeah. Well, people, this is one of the things, if you don't understand biochemistry, people can do it on their own. I mean, when you go to the market, you can just get the beef and the big layer of fat that's around the beef or pork or whatever. Just eat that. Don't eat any of the protein. Just eat the fat. Eat butter. And guess what? You're going to lose a lot of weight real quick. The issue is that fat consumption triggers in humans the hormone cholecystokinin, which then impacts the 10th cranial nerve and shutting down the appetite center. You don't feel full. You don't feel hungry. How many people are going to say, okay, give me this stick of butter. That'll be, they'll take one bite out of it and that's the end of it. Or if they have to eat the grizzle and the fat off the side of a beef, they're not going to be saying, let me have a big tub of this stuff. Or lard, a can of lard. People take a bite out of it and that's just about it. It's hard to get fat eating fat unless you eat massive amounts of it, and most people would never do that. So where you get your fat, where you get your put on your weight from is all the carbohydrates, and the best way to get fat is to eat lard with sugar, because it's like the icing on the cake. When you have icing, you put butter and sugar, powdered sugar together with the butter. Oh man, your body is going to store that sugar like there's no tomorrow because it realizes all the fat is the energy, and we're not going to pee out sugar unless we have diabetes. So we're going to save all that sugar as fat in the body. So I mean, if you got to be careful. All these high fructose corn syrup foods and all that stuff, man, that's like death. You eat that, man, you got diabetes, you got cancer, you got dementia, you got all kinds of stuff from all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I mentioned, one of my earlier videos, one of my favorite foods when I was younger was ice cream.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
everything in moderation is fine. You know, I mean, ice cream is a great dessert. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't eat it, but man, I love ice cream too. Who doesn't like ice cream? A lot of people.
Yeah,
You always find
I
some
don't think
guy
I've
out
ever
there
met
who's
anyone that doesn't.
you know,
Yeah. I think we just
yeah, it's just I think ice cream periodically and these kinds of things are a treat. They're not to be your major food source.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember when I was younger though, I actually ate like a 2-liter tub, and then I went out and did a triathlon.
It's great to be young.
Yes.
Yeah, if I did
you
that, I'd
do
be
all
in
the
the hospital.
stupid things. Yeah, do all the stupid things when you're young. So yeah, but I think we've naturally evolved to enjoy the sweets.
Oh yeah. Oh no, don't get me wrong.
Seasonally, we eat different fruits and just
Ripe
it grew
fruits.
wildly. Yeah,
Yeah.
love fruit.
Right.
So,
No. It's all this was seasonal in our evolutionary past. All of this stuff was seasonal.
Exactly.
You didn't have ripe fruits in the middle of the winter. You know, all these things. So we lived in a seasonal environment in general, and you know, we would enjoy feasts and parties only when we would have these things available to us. And now we have them available all the time. So we're in a constant state of party and feast environment.
Yeah, exactly. And with no famine. Well,
The famine on the part of that still puzzles me to the extent where I see all these poor kids starving in some of these countries in such a horrific way. And then I look and we see so much abundance of food in other parts of the world. And you think there'd be some sharing of foods, but they try doing all this, and I know governments corruption and all this kind of stuff prevents a lot of this, but it is a tragedy, and when you look at it that way.
Yeah, it is, and foundations and things like that. But at the moment, you can't really do much about the politics.
No.
Yeah, but as I said, and I agree. These should be sweets in that fruit. It's a seasonal sort of thing, and we
well, the other thing too is, of course, the fruits that we have today are bred selectively to be very high sweet fruits.
Yeah.
I mean, you see an apple today, some of these apples are the size of a softball. You know, I mean, our original apples were tiny little things, mostly kind of bitter, until you can get one at the height of the season. You know, along these lines. Now we have almost all the fruits have been engineered or selectively bred to be sweet. Bananas and oranges and all these.
Exactly, and to grow all year round as well.
Yeah, and their shelf lives are longer. I mean, all these things are modified, and they're all, engineered in some way or another, which is it's not as natural as it should be.
No.
But
the shelf life is a good point. I recently, my wife made some homemade bread, and we compared it to a piece of store-bought bread. We had the piece of bread sitting in the fridge for nearly 3 months, and it looked like the same day we bought it.
Yeah.
Compared to homemade bread, which lasted 1 week and it had fungus growing on it.
Yeah, and it goes stale quick too. It goes stale quick, but it tastes
stale the next day.
Yeah, but that you eat it that first day, and it's the best stuff you ever had.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. Right? And the smell just it's wonderful.
That's more natural. It doesn't have as many additives and preservatives and things like this, and that also impacts our body. It's not just the poorly nutritious foods that we have. We're also exposed to a lot more toxic chemicals today than we were in the past. And I think when you put the toxic chemicals, the bad air, the bad food, you put all these together, and it just beats the hell out of your poor body, produce all kinds of chronic diseases.
Yeah, it's not just what they take out of the food; it's what they put into it. And I think we've been conditioned to count calories. Count ingredients or chemicals. It's just a part of our conditioning. So what do you think it would take for the this to catch on, for cancer to be seen as a metabolic disease rather than a genetic disease?
Well, I think it's starting to catch on now. There's a lot more people hearing about it. One of the things that is to the best advantage is most people don't want radiation and chemo. It's not like you're trying to pull an avid group of people off something they really like. If these folks knew that there was another way to manage their condition that doesn't require a medieval approach, I think they'll be most acceptable about that. The biggest resistance right now in metabolic therapy is the lack of knowledge on the part of the oncology field. The physicians just never heard about this stuff. They were never trained to know the biology of cancer as a metabolic disease. And of course, that's been institutionalized in the part of the federal government, and not only the US, all over the world, where they say cancer is a genetic disease, making people feel that they have very little control over their destiny, because if it's a genetic disease, well, how you change your genes, but the mutations that we and others have shown are all downstream effects of the abnormal metabolism. So it takes time for the ship to right it. So you're talking about an enormous industry, not only in the medical practice, but also in the pharmaceutical development of drugs and procedures, all in one way or another related to cancer as a genetic disease for the most part. So how you change that is if you have people who have done metabolic therapy and have achieved management with good quality of life, and these guys then go out and tell others, I managed my stage 4 cancer doing this strategy. And eventually the word gets out. It's hard to put a cap on something like that. As a matter of fact, the documentary movie will be coming out this fall, part 1 or 2, called The Cancer Revolution, which is now collecting all of these folks that have survived stage 4 cancers using metabolic therapy. And they're discussing the actual confrontation or the new view that cancer is a metabolic disease and not a genetic disease, challenging the very foundation upon which the field thinks cancer is. And I think once that knowledge comes out and spreads around, it's going to be like a grass fire. It's going to be, people are going to want to do it. They as an alternative to toxic chemicals, and there'll be hybrid systems developed. So it's going to be quite interesting to see. We certainly cannot maintain the status quo. That is not acceptable any longer, especially when we have options that are far, far better than what we currently have. You can only hold that back for a certain period of time.
No, I agree. I mean, the truth always comes out. And creating more awareness, obviously.
Right. I think you have to be aware of it. And you also realize now with metabolic therapy that the patient plays a much greater role in the management of their disease. Whereas what we currently have is the patient really plays very little a role. When people say, oh, this guy or that woman is battling their cancer, they're not battling anything. They're sitting down in a chair and being infused by poisonous chemicals, or some part of their body is being irradiated, or something is being, what are they doing? They're not doing anything except what they're being told to do. But when you do metabolic therapy, man, a lot of the success will fall on the shoulders of the patients. They have to measure their blood glucose ketone index themselves. And they will know right off the bat whether they're in the right zone for therapeutic benefit. If they can't get into that zone, I tell so many people say, oh my God, I can't get into the zone. I've eaten this and I eat that and I can't. Well, don't eat anything. Just drink water and see if you can get into the zone. And then they say, oh yeah, I can get into the zone. Okay. And then they modify their diet until they can manage to get into the zone of low glucose, high keto. The key 2.0 and below is what we published. And if the patients can get into that zone, then it's on their shoulders. Then these drugs work so much better. So they need to know that.
Yeah, exactly. See, when I went through all that, I didn't know all this. You're right. Yeah, when you're going through chemotherapy, you're just a passenger.
Yeah, you have no control. You're just there.
Yeah. So the only thing you're really fighting is the chemotherapy itself. You're trying to survive that.
Yeah. Well, then you're battling the treatment that they're giving you, not the
That's right.
cancer.
Exactly.
So,
You're actually fighting the treatment they're trying to give you.
right.
But it makes it more difficult too when the advice that is given on your diet. When I was going through all this and afterwards, my immune system was completely gone. So
Yeah.
my goal at the time was to try and build it back up, because I was very, very prone to any sort of infection, and I had quite severe infections.
Yeah, well, that should not be.
No.
With metabolic therapy, your immune system gets stronger, not weaker.
That's right. And see, the only answers I ever got was, we don't know. We don't know how to build your immune system. And they told me, I actually had some strange advice actually from a lot of them. Not always my oncologists. They're good people. They just don't, and I could see they just don't understand what my body needed. I was actually told that, fast food and junk food was actually good for me because it would actually starve the cancer. That's
just the opposite. That's just the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. They actually they told me that because the food is so low in nutrients that the cancer can't feed, because
cancer doesn't feed on nutrients; it feeds on sugar.
No. Yeah.
So, we know
this
exactly.
was the advice I was getting from my diet.
Yeah, no. What we did in my lab is we grew cells, cancer cells, and we stripped away everything. Just grow them in saline, which is salt solution, and they live, but they don't live very long because there's nothing in there for them to eat. And you find out, okay, let's add stuff back. When we add certain things back, what is it that they mostly use to stay alive? And we went through everything, all the amino acids and sugars and all kinds of stuff. And it's glucose, the sugar glucose, and the amino acid glutamine. Those two fuels drive the beast. And we haven't found anything that comes even close to those two fuels. I mean, yeah, they can survive for short periods of time on other things. But those two fuels, man, they are superchargers to keep that cancer cell growing. So we know exactly what they need to survive. And we just target those two fuels and the cancer cells die. And they can't eat fatty acids and ketone bodies. We tested all that. It can't. So we know we know what they can eat and what they can't eat. So it's very simple. You just take and the normal cells of the body love fats and ketone bodies. Cancer cells can't use fats and ketone bodies. So you transition the whole body over to keto, fat and ketone bodies, and then you target the glucose and the glutamine, because your body can live without glucose. The glutamine you have to be a little bit more careful about. And there's no foods that we can eat or not eat to reduce glutamine. So we have to use some drugs, and we're working on those drugs right now. So it's going to be that's part of the treatment strategy that we're developing.
Yeah. Well, as I said, like some of the dietary advice I was getting was pretty poor, to say the least.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. What about the medications that go along with this? While I was on the chemotherapy, I was on upwards of 40 different pills a day. A lot of the pills were to treat the side effects of the pills that they actually gave me.
Yeah.
Including steroids.
Steroids make your blood sugar go higher. As I said, we look at I've gone through the entire literature on all these different cancers and treatments, and every one of the major cancers that we know of, the common cancers, are all grow faster when blood sugar is higher. So the higher the blood sugar, the faster whatever tumor you have grows. If you take any therapy like a steroid or something that makes your blood sugar, radiation makes your blood sugar go up. Steroids make your blood sugar go up. And these are counterproductive to, they can rescue some of these cancer cells, so that when you stop taking the steroids and the radiation or whatever, these cancer cells are already well embedded and they've already been rescued by the treatments. So they always get what they call recurrence. These cancer cells recur. Well, you created an environment making recurrence a high probability. So you got to make sure that you starve them of what they need, because without energy, nothing can grow. You have to people all forget that. Oh, how is this cancer cell growing? Well, it's got to have energy. Without energy, it can't grow, and we can't grow either. As I told people, if you want to see how important energy is, if you take cyanide, which is a poison, you die within minutes of cyanide, because you shut your energy system down, oxygen-dependent energy, instantly, and you die very, very quickly. But cancer cells can live in cyanide. They don't die from cyanide. So that clearly tells us that they're using a totally different energy system to stay alive from the normal cells of the body. And that system is an ancient fermentation pathway where they use these fermentable fuels, which are glucose and glutamine. So the strategy for managing cancer then becomes, how do we target glucose and glutamine simultaneously? And then when you go to your oncology clinic and say, listen, can you target simultaneously the glucose and glutamine that's targeting they look at you like a deer in the headlight. They're not trained to know what you're talking about. And these guys are smart people. I mean, they obviously had to get through medical school and go through college and stuff like this. So they apparently are able to memorize stuff, but they wouldn't be where they were if they couldn't memorize stuff. So they need to be retrained.
Are you passionate about the groundbreaking and heroic research of Dr. Thomas Seyfried on metabolic therapy and cancer? So are we. That's why we've created something special for you, in collaboration with Johnny Rockermeyer, a German book publisher and translator. Introducing our collection of meticulously crafted books that distill the essence of Dr. Seyfried's work. Dive into the science and discoveries. These summary books are your gateway to understanding the intricate world of metabolic ketogenic therapy in a clear, concise, and engaging way. Whether you're new to the subject or a seasoned enthusiast, our books offer insights that can change your life. Ready to explore this transformative knowledge? Visit our website at www.cancerasametabolicdisease.com to get your copy. You can buy the ebook there directly and the paper book via the provided links. Here's the best part. A portion of every purchase goes directly to support Dr. Thomas Seyfried's groundbreaking research. That's why the direct ebook purchase is the best option to donate as much as possible. You can see all of the donations Mr. Rockermeyer has already made at www.ketoforcancer.net. That's right, when you buy our books, you're not just investing in your own knowledge, you're also contributing to the future of cancer research. Help us make a difference. Together, we can drive change and save lives.
Those folks need to know that the tumor cell cannot grow without fermentable fuels, and those fermentable fuels are glucose and glutamine. So let's change the strategy for managing cancer to target glucose and glutamine while transitioning the whole body off to fatty acids and ketones. And that's the solution to this cancer problem.
Yeah. I tend to think that the way doctors are trained at the moment, that it's kind of like a paint by numbers. That the roadmap's already set out and they just remember it and just follow it no matter what.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. And they need to be more flexible. But it's not only on them, it's the whole system itself is locked into. The hospitals demand the poor physicians do this stuff. Many physicians know this stuff is not going to work. I can't tell you how many physicians have come to me for help. All walks, all kinds of physicians, when they get cancer. When they're finally diagnosed with cancer, or whatever kind of cancer it is, they come to me and says, maybe I'll start looking into metabolic therapy. And so clearly they know whatever they're getting, that's not going to be a real help them. And they don't want to do what you did either. I mean, they don't want to be suffering like this. So, so it's going to take time for the system to come to realize that the nature of what they think the disease is not that. And there's so many other ways that we can manage this without the toxicity that we currently have.
Now, you said that you started a lot of this because of Otto Warburg's work. Now, how and why do you think this became what they call standard of care? Why is it so ingrained, and why is it a must-do for every hospital?
Yeah, well, that people should start asking that question. Why is there no flexibility on this? Warburg Warburg knew the origin of cancer, and we validated what he knew. But we've taken a new step further. We've taken it several steps further than what Otto Warburg did. He was correct in knowing the origin of the disease. He never was able to develop a therapy based on his understanding of the origin. And then he got himself into some controversy in the field, which still exists today, where his measurements of energy we now know were incorrect. They're not accurate. Oxygen consumption is not a good marker for energy through oxidative phosphorylation in cancer cells. It is okay in normal cells, but not cancer cells. So he was led down that misinformation. He also thought that glucose was the only fermentable fuel that these cells could use. We now know that it's glutamine as well as glucose. So we're learning more about why the field got into such a big controversy in the first place. And then, of course, when they discovered that genes were damaged in cancer, everybody ran off like lemmings following that trail. Several Nobel Prize were awarded for folks that were looking at the genetics of cancer. And we're still here with 1,600 people a day dying from cancer, and it's becoming worse around the world. So, but I think we can drop this death rate by half, 50% in 10 years if we recognize this disease as a metabolic disease. And the clinical trial systems are all going to have to change, because we can't do double-blind crossover with metabolic therapy like they do for a single drug in the clinic. And we have to change. We have to look at overall survival rather than progression-free survival. So many of the drugs that have been approved by the Food and Drug Administration give us improved progression-free survival, but minimal, if any, change in overall survival. So you feel good, and then all of a sudden you're dead. Or the cancer looks like it's being managed, but you don't live any longer. These kinds of things. This is nonsense. If you have something that works, only things that are going to advance your survivability by 3 or 4-fold greater than what it is currently should be approved. All this other stuff is nonsense. It's just money-making things that really don't help patients in any significant way. And they should realize that any drug based on the somatic mutation theory is going to be a bust anyway. It might help a few people, but it's not going to help the majority of folks. So that all has to change. So what I'm saying is a giant paradigm shift in the whole cancer field in order to bring it where it should be and let folks live a lot longer with a greater probability of overall survival and quality of life. Just like you said, how do you feel? I feel pretty good. Okay, well, that's what you want. But you didn't want to walk over hot rocks for as long as you did in order to get to that state.
No, I don't want that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
No.
And I think it's not just about cancer either. It's health right across the board. This really needs to be a large paradigm shift. And the way we consume stuff as well, take responsibility for our own health as well.
Well, and the other thing too is our lifestyles are so geared for quick things, and exercise is becoming less and less in society as we become more technological, driving cars, using cell phones and computers. I mean, it's hard to work or talk on a cell phone when you're jogging. It's you're sitting in traffic. There's a lot of stress. There's all kinds of things that all together impact poor food, poor exercise, stress, and you end up with all kinds of chronic diseases. And that's because we're locked into this kind of a society, these highly technical societies. But people need to be aware of it and try to do the best they can, and try to accentuate those things that are going to help them and try to minimize. But it's hard, man. I mean, they're drinking gallons of sweet tea and all this crazy shit, man. They should put the skull and crossbone on some of this, like they do on a pack of cigarettes.
Absolutely.
Let people know this stuff is going to kill you if you take too much of it too often. I mean, you start smoking cigarettes, you don't drop dead after the second cigarette. I mean, usually you're smoking them for years before you finally get some sort of a problem. Well, after years of consuming, sweet tea and Coke and all this kind of crazy stuff, the next thing you know, I have bladder cancer, colon cancer, and all this kind of stuff.
There's a good example. Cigarettes. We know these stuff is bad for us. It's not like it's unknown. No. Coke and hamburgers, all these ultra processed foods and cigarettes, they're not actually marketed as health food. But we still do it.
It's human nature, man. I tell you. I mean, they're stress relievers. I mean, nothing makes you feel better if you're miserable than a nice sweet thing. Big hero sandwich or something like this. I mean, I eat those stuff. I eat that stuff too. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I avoid, but I don't eat it very often. And every now and then, I don't know, pizza. Yeah, we could pizza, but you don't eat pizza every day. Coca-Cola, I rarely, if ever, drink Coke. As a kid, I used to drink a lot of that stuff. I didn't think it was going to kill me. As a matter of fact, when you're young, your body can tolerate so much stuff. I mean, but if you keep doing that for 45, 50 years, all of a sudden you end up with all kinds of problems.
Exactly. Yeah, I was the same, especially, growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was, you drink more soft drinks than you do water. I know. It's just the way it goes. Yeah. So I can understand now why my cancer developed. So but changing people's minds is a very difficult thing, and
but at least we know about it.
We always tend to think it won't happen to us. And so it's I'll be fine. I'll keep drinking. Right. But eventually it catches up with us. So actually I just was reading in America, and it's the same here in Australia. The number one killer is cardiovascular disease. Number two is cancer, and then medication errors is number three. All of which are obviously avoidable. Yeah.
You stay out of hospitals, you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the last few years would have proven that too. So this is something that people need to be more aware of. I think taking responsibility for our diet, as we said. I know people are a little bit hesitant when it comes to adding more responsibility, especially in today's, because they're so busy. But I think it gives them more freedom, because they, like you said about with the chemo and everything like that, it puts you in the driver's seat when you're on metabolic therapy rather than chemo. You have more control over your health, rather than everyone just so expects to have a magic pill,
Yeah, well, I think with when you have a glucose ketone index, and you know that if you're in the certain zone, that your tumor cells are going to be suffering more, at least the person has in their hand the capability of getting into the zone, and that depends on what level of willpower and motivation they have to survive. And there are some folks that don't care, and we always have to realize that. And some folks just said, "The hell with all this give me the radiation and the chemo, and I'll be fine." And we're not depriving. Metabolic therapy does not tell cancer patients that we're not going to, that a radiation and chemo will not be available. No, it's always available for those folks that want it. I don't know how many people line up to get it, but they're certainly there. But I think you're 100% correct. When you do metabolic therapy, you have a much, much greater control over your destiny than you would have had if you just did standard of care.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think mentally, you'll have a more positive outlook as well.
And the family supports too. You always have to have family support, which is absolutely essential. So the whole family needs to rally behind the patient. and give them the kind of support that they need, because it's different. If everybody is sitting down, drinking Coca-Cola and eating pizzas every night, and this poor guy who has the cancer is trying to manage it without eating any of that stuff, the environment becomes more tempting and more difficult to survive. So,
exactly right, yeah.
so it really needs to be a family unit that all work together to help the patient. And people begin to modify. I can't tell you how many families have started to modify their diets and lifestyles in support of the patient, because they all benefit from that. And so it really does bring families together, and it also brings overall health improvement in the entire family, not only to the patient but also the other members of the family.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people they need that support group, whether it's family or sometimes it can be outside the family. But
right,
if you take away temptation, it makes it so much easier.
Well, I agree with you. I think support groups are really valuable, because if you're trying to get into zones and what kind of diets, people are always asking me, can I eat this or can I eat that? And I always say, what does it do to your glucose ketone index? We tested a lot in the past. We looked at our students. We'd fast them for a couple of days and then give them food or drink and see what it did to their GKI. And to some foods like meat, meat doesn't jack your GKI up too much. Coca-Cola for sure. That spikes you unbelievable. But we tested a dry red wine. Red wine didn't do much. The problem is if you drink too much of it, your inhibitions become less inhibited, and you're more likely to eat a hamburger or something that's going to spike your blood sugar. But we tested a lot of different kinds of things. Can vegans? Everybody can get into a zone, but it's sometimes a little harder depending on the diet that you have. So again, carnivore diet, Mediterranean diet, vegan diet, pesca diet, the fish diets, whatever you want to call them. You can get, everybody can get into the zone, but it could be harder for some than others.
Yeah, I agree. For me, the choice to go carnivore, or more over the last 9 years, was more caveman style, so like seasonal fruits and that sort of thing. But as a treat, was the actual rebuilding process, because of all the damage from chemotherapy. So something like a vegan diet, even though it might put me at low blood sugar, to rebuild after something like that, you need to have a lot of ultra processed supplements that I just think that are not going to be as healthy a choice. So I think, I mean, if you haven't already had the chemotherapy and radiation, a vegan diet might help you very much. As long as, I think the key is to get rid of the ultra processed foods.
I agree.
Sugar.
I think that's I think that's correct, because it seems as though from the studies on Mediterranean diets, it was good against cancer, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease. It's not that the vegan diet, it's not that the Mediterranean diet is having all these positive effects. It's the fact that the Mediterranean diet does not include highly processed carbohydrates. So you're eating foods that are more natural, and the absence of the provocative foods are not there. So again, as I said, healthy vegan diet, healthy Mediterranean diet, and all these diets that are so-called healthy, they don't have highly processed carbohydrates. Poorly nutritious, highly processed foods. You eat natural stuff, and you're more likely to get into a lower GKI and get generally healthier with exercise. Don't forget, exercise critical.
No.
I can't tell you how important
Absolutely.
exercise is.
Yeah, especially when rebuilding, you need to have physical strength there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it also teaches you mentally how much you can push yourself and how resilient your body can be.
Well, and also, it depends. Young people can do that. I mean, if I try to do what you did with those exercises and things, I'd be in the hospital. Right? I have to have joint replacements. You know, the thing, you have to adjust the exercise to your age and your physical state. You know.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I mean, it took a long time to get there.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But you reach a point when your body is old enough that you can never get there. You just try to keep what little you have left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, with exercise and it always comes down to, age, condition.
Well, you'll reach an age at some point where you damage your body doing that too. Wait until you rip your rotator cuff or something like this, and all of a sudden you're knocked out for a while. Your hip, your knee, or some part of your body just breaks down from using it so much. Then you have to kind of readjust your exercise schedule to adjust your body in the new dimension. But I think walking and swimming and things like this, bike riding, and as long as you can get cardiovascular health. Or exercise, cardiovascular exercise, keep everything working, is to your benefit. And if you can match that with a better diet, low carbohydrate, low processed foods, you have a tendency to do better. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And exercise doesn't have to be a whole lot, and it doesn't have to be time consuming either. You can use a lot of incidental exercise as well.
If you can, people will have to recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you can make a choice between an elevator and taking the stairs, for example.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do that every day. I take the stairs. And then the kids on the campus down on the lower, there's a long series of stairs, and then there's the elevator in the building. And you can't believe how many students would prefer to pack in like sardines into these elevators rather than climb the stairs.
Yeah. So many times actually, while I was living in Japan, you see lines and lines of people, crowds trying to go up the escalator, and there's absolutely no one using the stairs.
It's part of human nature.
Yeah, exactly. Let the stairs do the walking. So yeah, it's quite funny. But it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be. I think a lot of people get confused when it comes to exercise too. They see a lot of other people do.
It's called just movement. Movement.
Yeah, just it's just small steps, and it'll get you there, and your momentum picks up as well. And I think it's the same with your diet. If you don't, I don't think it's a good idea to go cold turkey, so to speak. No. Just gradually ease yourself into these sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll find it much easier to adjust. Physically.
Well, that's what we said with the keto, with going to manage cancer. Some people, you do a zero carbohydrate diet for about 14 days, just meat and whatever. Your blood sugar goes down, your ketones go up, and then you can take a step to water-only fasting. And that step now is much, much easier than going cold turkey. It's so hard to go cold turkey on water-only fasting. It's really very difficult. But if you did zero carb diet for a week or 2 days, a week or two, the step to water-only fasting is very transitional, not difficult at all. So people need to know all this.
Before you're fasting as well, I think it's very important also to get your mineral levels up as well, especially your iron.
Well, I mean, there's certain supplements you can take to facilitate those things. And there's certain kinds of foods you can eat too, like good liver. Actually, liver has a lot of good minerals in it. If you can get organic liver, for sure. Whether it's a chicken or a cow, those liver, they have a lot of tremendous nutrients in them. But again, the liver is a filtration system for crap. So you want to make sure you get some sort of an organic liver rather than some cow eating all kinds of highly processed foods.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's another problem people have today is finding clean food.
Yeah, that's another
that's
a real challenge.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. But people think they're eating healthy, and they're actually just taking in more chemicals.
No.
But we do the best we can. But as I said, I think it's very important to get all your mineral levels up high before you start fasting. Otherwise, you can suffer a great deal. It'll just be a much easier process. Yeah, for the body anyway. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so grateful for taking so much time out of your busy schedule. But I won't keep you talking all day because obviously going to be a lot of things to do. So thank you very much. Just fantastic information.
Well, thank you, David. You're looking healthy. You're looking good, and I hope you can stay that way for well into the future.